Hi there, I'm Dean Heskin, President and CEO of Swiss America Trading, and you are tuned in to our podcast entitled The Secret War on Cash, where we take a good look into some of the emerging things and enterprises that are taking place in the U.S. economy and global economy for that matter. I have with me today my frequent co-host, Chris Agelastos. Good morning, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Well, it's good to have you on. We're going to talk about BRICS today. And when I say BRICS, I'm not talking about, those basketball shots that hit the rim and don't go anywhere. We're talking about BRICS, the alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This has been a story that has probably been one of the more rapidly growing or developing stories of really anything that we've talked about. I mean, we've talked about banking, we've talked about gold and markets, but BRICS is kind of growing and catching like wildfire. And so as we get right into this first article here, it's kind of frightening if you really kind of break this title of the article down, Chris. The BRICS de-dollarization coincides with U.S. recession as debt concerns grow. And the reason I say that it's kind of frightening is because this whole BRICS initiative and de-dollarization, it's a thing. I mean, these countries that have jumped on board, and we're now talking about literally dozens of them. It's literally with the sole purpose of de-dollarization, which just means not wanting to be not have the, what's the word I'm looking for, the reliance on the U.S. dollar in terms of their economy. They're strengthening their own currencies, which is certainly a smart thing to do. But as you start really breaking it down, Chris, even further, yes, our U.S. recession is a real thing. Our debt concerns, that does continue to grow. But it's also kind of getting into the fact that none of these countries, which you cannot blame them for, they don't want to be holding dollars. They don't want to be the last guy holding dollars when if and when the dollar collapses. So tell us a little more about this article and tell us what you see here.
Well, I think one of the bigger concerns for me is that, and we've talked about this before, it's sort of a perfect storm in this situation. Yes, the U.S. is in a recession. We obviously have debt issues. Declining job health. Every day we're hearing of more and more companies here in the U.S. Continuing layoffs. And all of this is happening while BRICS is growing and gaining momentum and support. So, I think BRICS would be a legitimate challenge for us, even if we didn't have all these issues, if we were still in a healthy economy and in a strong position. They would still be a worthy opponent. But the fact that we're heading the wrong direction and they're heading the right direction for them, and these are big issues that you can't just stop and turn on a dime. It's not like this coming fall, all of a sudden we're not going to have any recession or debt issues in our country, right? These are not things that you can just fix overnight. These are not things that you can just put a new president in office and all of a sudden fix these problems either. We've seen that through multiple administrations. It's a constant battle between sides to get anything done here. And so when you really look at the big picture and step back and see sort of all the disadvantages that we're having to deal with in our country right now, and you see the advantages and the growth that these other nations are getting, being part of this BRICS alliance, it's really concerning. I mean, it shows you that this is a path that we're on that we're not able to just turn around, and at some point we're going to have to deal with it. It may not be tomorrow or even 6 months from now, but at some point this is going to be a major issue. And I think obviously knowledge is power. Preparing for these things now versus later is a better way to go.
Sure. Well, and we've talked about this before, where it is interesting because as much as this whole BRICS alliance has been growing in terms of nations that are jumping on board and just the relevancy that it has in the global marketplace, global economy, it is amazing to me. Like if you're watching CNBC or Fox Business, it really does not get covered that much. And I mean,
Yeah.
this is a very serious thing. And taking a look at this next article, you know, and we've found, certainly for our podcast purposes, plenty of articles, plenty of content out
Yeah.
there. But on the airwaves, you just really don't hear much about it. And like in this article, the next one, you know, BRICS is working, I'm quoting here, BRICS is working on the formation of a new currency in the global markets to challenge the US dollar supremacy. And it goes on to say the alliance aims to uproot the US dollar from the world's reserve and replace it with this new BRICS currency. Well, this is not a little thing. This is a huge thing. The dollar has
Yeah.
reigned supreme for decades, decades and decades. And we've already seen it as countries had, due to the OPEC agreement way back in the 70s, they were, you know, part of that agreement was stipulated that countries, if they wanted to buy and sell oil throughout the globe, across the globe, that was to be done in dollar denominated transactions. So if they had their own currency, they had to convert it to dollars in order to do these transactions. Now they've just decided we're not going to do this anymore. And again, these are not small problems. And it's just, you know, it, like I said, it fascinates me that this is not something that is gaining more notoriety, more coverage in the news, because it doesn't take much. If the U.S. dollar were to fall victim to the extent that, let's say, Putin wants it to in this de-dollarization effort, I mean, that could leave our currency worthless, could it not?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we know from history, all paper currencies are replaced eventually. We just don't get a timeline as to when that's going to happen. And actually, the U.S. dollar has had a really good run, you know, compared to other nations in the past. But you know, there's a couple things here. I think, you know, part of the reason we may not hear about this a lot in the mainstream media is because we really haven't heard of a solid solution. And I'm not so sure that either political party wants to point out a huge problem without having a potential solution in place. You know, I think either party realizes that you know, this is a negative issue that they're not exactly sure how to address,
Right.
and so they, you know, I don't want to say distract us, but they focus on other issues that are very divisive in order to try and get votes on their side. But and the other thing is too, what I think a lot of people don't realize, this is sort of a two-step process. You know, we've talked about BRICS replacing the U.S. dollar, but really the first step is just having all of these member nations start using their own currencies for cross-border transactions, and that's already happening. You know,
Right.
their goal obviously is to end their dependency on the dollar, and so they're actively pushing forward and promoting member currencies. That's the first step. So we've already seen that happen. It's continuing to grow. The second step is going to be this new BRICS currency that they are trying to put together. So, you know, minimize everybody's dependence on the dollar first, gain strength in their own economies by using their currencies, and then introduce this new, stronger, more accepted BRICS currency to really, you know, ultimately dethrone the dollar. And again, not good for us, but good for a lot of these member nations. And I think that's why you see, you know, more and more countries jumping on board, or at least investigating, you know, whether or not they want to be part of BRICS.
Right, right. Well, and I'll tell you what's a little different to me, anyways. This dynamic that exists with BRICS. You know, we've covered, and there's no shortage of information out there right now that suggests that we might have a stock market correction, crash,
Hmm.
collapse. In fact, I just read an article here today talking about how somebody is suggesting like we could see a crash worse than 1929. But
Yeah.
with that said, you look at our stock market, you know, with circuit breakers and whatever else, there are certain controls that we have that even in the midst of a correction or a downturn in the marketplace, they can try to, and they can to some extent, kind of turn the faucet off for a little bit in hopes that things kind of
Right.
stabilize. The difference with this, with what we see with BRICS, is that that's really something we don't have any kind of direct control over.
Yeah.
And
Good point.
I shudder to think, Chris, that at any point in time, we could be getting ready to tape a podcast where all of a sudden, like, BRICS is just, they've crushed the dollar. I mean, it's happened.
Right.
Like, we won't be talking about what could be happening or taking place. It will have happened. So it definitely is something that it's every time that we do this, cover this topic on a podcast, it just seems like, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's just more and more information lending to the fact that this is a growing concern, or should be a growing concern, and should be getting addressed. And I don't, like we've talked about like our banking system. These are problems that just don't seem to be getting addressed, and problems that are going to be very serious before it's all said and done. So anyway, well, thank you, Chris. And we will again continue to watch this as we do all the other things out there. For those of you tuning in to our podcast here, The Secret War on Cash, thank you for doing so. If you have not subscribed, please do so. And as always, contact our office if you have questions, you want to learn more about diversification and metals. You can call at 1-800-289-2646, or you can visit us online at Swiss America. That's SWISS America, all one word.com. So thanks again, Chris. For those of you tuning in, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Take care.